So this is the basis of something that is very unique uh, in the African American church, and not just African American, but we can take the American side off and just say in the African portion, because that's where we're grabbing a lot of the influence that is communal and very social. So the title of this is The Shout in American's Black Pentecostal Church. So we're going to look at what we're dealing with in Shout, not just something that you do, but that is part of the worship service of the United House of Prayer Church, which actually finds its root in the Azusa Street movement. So we're going to look at this really quick, and you tell me what you think of this. So I'm pointing and I'm clicking, hopefully the right direction. Here we go. So what is this? This is what is known as a shout band. And I stopped it in a particular spot, and I'll go back and explain that spot that I stopped in. But there's several things that we need to look at, and that is shout bands. And looking at it, and how it really parallels Pentecostalism. First thing we look at is how it developed. If we look at Pentecostalism, the place that I'm going to focus on is Los Angeles. We have the kind of the beginning of the Pentecostal movement. Of course, we know it starts before then, but we can look at the shout band and we know that it actually started in a major metropolitan area, Newport News, Virginia, and moving down to North Carolina into South Carolina. Also, when we're looking at Pentecostalism, we're looking at all of a sudden we're having a mixture of races together. We're not just separated where we're at a white church or a black church or what have you. All of a sudden we're seeing worshipers together. Also, we see this movement, an emotional movement of the Spirit throughout the congregation. It's not a separation of people from God. All of a sudden, we know the Holy Spirit begins to move through the people. And through this, there's a challenging of musical styles. We're moving away from hymns, so to speak. All of a sudden, we're being able to see call and response that is within the church, and we're hearing congregational singing and choir singing that happens. And this is actually outside of cultural norms, everything that we're looking at before this. And of course, when we're looking at shout bands, we see that they are moving away from what is stereotypical, even with instruments begin to be used within the church. Clicking. There we go. So in this setting, all we're looking at, what are these things that are in the gospel setting, that are in the worship setting? We're seeing choirs that are being sung to the people to allow for the move of the Holy Spirit or to invite the Holy Spirit. But there's congregational singing, so they're able to respond and sing also to allow even freer flow of the Spirit. It's not a separation between only the choir has this, I'm not going to use the word power, but possesses this only move of the Holy Spirit through them. It's not just about the choir, it's about the entire congregational being able to sing and worship together. There's hand clapping, so all of a sudden there's percussion, there's rhythm, there's movement that's beginning to happen. It's not just boredom, and highbrow music. There's dancing, shout as movement. All of a sudden, if the spirit is moving, all of a sudden it would be nothing to see someone to jump up and begin to dance in front of the churches. And all of a sudden, musical instruments are used, not just organs and pianos, but we'll see saxophones and trombones, drum sets also throughout the service. This is happening simply because of the the teachings and the theology from John Wesley, who's the personal conversion, whereas there's a repenting. I acknowledge that I have sinned and I need to turn and move away. But only through the power of the Holy Spirit can a person actually be transformed and made new. So we're looking at this from the teachings of John Wesley. So what does this shout band sound like? We know that it's unique to the United House of Prayer, and the music is extremely lively, as you were able to see. There's moving around. It's not just in one spot. We have movement. It's not highbrow. It's something that connects with each and every individual. And we can look at them and not just call them shout bands, but we can think of them as gospel charismatic trombone choirs, able to move the people from one point to the next point. So this music, let's look at it before it has been developed into the standard that it is today. And that is, in the 1930s, it wasn't the same. We have music that is voice-led, which means that people are singing. So we don't have trombones necessarily in the church. So people were singing. The music is heavily syncopated, which means that the music is more or less on the weaker side of the beat, not just 1, 2, 3, 4, but all of a sudden we get this lively hitting on the offbeats, as we can say. The vocals are layered, and so it's triadic. It could be thirds, it could be fifths, sevenths, flat sevenths, ninths, but the harmony will be held by the congregational singers. And the music had the power to lift those into a higher state. So even if they came in downtrodden, then all of a sudden they can be lifted and they can feel good and they can feel great, knowing that the Holy Spirit was in control. So precursors to this that's happening within the 1930s into the 1940s and 50s. Before 1960s is when we get the standardization of these shout bands. The first band was the tambourine band, in which it was a percussion instrument and it accompanied the singers at this time. So we have a percussion instrument and we have singing, congregational singing that is going on. This quickly moved to string bands, in which we added guitars and banjos along with the tambourines. So all of a sudden we have these instruments accompanying the voices. So it definitely has moved away from hymnal singing. And finally, we move to the mixed wind bands, in which we're adding whatever instruments are available at each individual church. So we can have clarinets, or we can have trumpets and trombones, organs. We can use any of these instruments together. The big difference is